Hello, everyone. In response to a couple of people's concerns in the discussion board with the introductions, I wanted to give kind of like a further mini lecture about analysis because this is probably, and I get why a lot of people were a little anxious, let's say, about kind of the analytical parts to the class because it is tough, but you do it every day. Like we analyze a lot of different stuff, especially if you're in sports, you analyze a lot of different kind of plays. You may challenge a referee's call and so forth. So we'll look at just kind of analysis briefly, right? So let's kind of get into what is analysis and, of course, what does it mean to analyze. So in terms of a good analogy, metaphor, think of it like a dissection. So instead of, dissecting, obviously biology, some kind of living being, right, to find out all the different working components, we basically take a text and dissect it as well. So, in terms of what you do intellectually when you analyze literature and film and so forth, it's a dissection of parts. It's a deduction to meaning, right? Based on these things that I see in front of me or these lines that I'm reading, what can I conclude? So it answers how and why questions. So just kind of an important one to always ask yourself: how and why does an author create the setting in the way they do, right? How does an author create the character in the way they do? So this is, I think, an important aspect to think about. So for those of us who are really concerned about analysis, how and why questions are the best way to start. Why is this character doing this, right? Why is it set in this setting? uh, how does this character influence the plot or the conflict and so forth? So a lot of times thinking about those how and why questions will kind of help. Now there's a good kind of classic module of like the three phases of close reading, right? So close reading is a sustained and careful analysis of any kind of text or work that it focuses on specific details, patterns, typically examining some aspect of form, craft, and of course meaning. So a lot of times what people do to break it down, it's like, okay, phase one is just like summary, right? What does the text say? What's happening, right? Who, what, where, when, kind of thing. Notice not why yet, because that's the greater analysis. So, who is important to the story? What is happening? What are the conflicts, right? When is it set? Where is it set? Like all these kind of questions help to kind of focus our summary modules, right? Our summary ideas where, okay, like what does this say? Not what does this mean? So the next phrase again is more analytical, is like how does it say it, right? So like what are the descriptive words, right? Are we dealing with, a dark setting, a light setting, a happy mood, a sad mood, right? What's the tone, right? All these things, right, kind of matter. What's the point of view? Is it told in first person? Is it told in second person or third person? On all these things, right? So that is again kind of leading into where we get analysis, right? Because it's easy to summarize, right? You could easily tell me what the story is about, right? What's the conflict? What are the characters? So then it's that kind of getting into the kind of what does the text mean, right? So what does it say? How does it say it? And then what does it ultimately mean? And that's what we're looking for when we are analyzing. So again, it's what does it mean? Why is it important? And then, of course, how is this established? To help you ground intellectually what you're doing is we're uncovering subtext. So subtext is kind of an important idea. It shouldn't exist. We have words, they should mean what they mean, right? But we have subtext. And this is where one word could totally mean something and change the meaning of an entire sentence just by how it's intonated or how it's used. Subtext is tricky. It's the underlying meaning behind what is said or written. It is the implicit and then, of course, typically metaphorical meaning. It's the meaning we derived from what is not directly stated or presented. Again, this is what annoys people who are very kind of like logical and minded people, very literal minded people, right? Drax character from Guardians of the Galaxy is a perfect example. He's now become this, like, especially the last since the first Guardians of the Galaxy came out. Almost immediately, everyone with Asperger's and a lot of kind of autistic experiences really started loving that character because he didn't get metaphors, right? The whole line of like, "Oh, it went over your head," and he's like, "Nothing goes over my head. I'll catch it." This is crucial because understanding subtext is very difficult for certain people. So the frustrations that you have with analysis is really the frustrations that you have with subtext because obviously pieces of art are never literal, right? They're always metaphoric, always beyond, right, what's in front of you. We encode subtext to understand it. Now, here's a couple examples to help you kind of figure out what subtext you kind of know instinctively because of how society interacts and so forth. But of course, when it becomes on the page or on the screen, it gets a little more complicated. Again, even if you don't realize it, we find subtext usually through implication, and we use it all the time in writing and speaking. So, for example, someone asks you, right? Let's say someone asks me, what could you possibly do with an English degree, right? Well, I would be offended by this question. Now, if you don't understand why I'm offended by this question, this is the difference between literal and subtextual, right? Literally, what are they asking me, right? What could you possibly do with an English degree, right? They're asking me for information. But that's not what's happening in a subtextual context. If they wanted to ask me information, they would leave out a crucial word. And if you understand why this word is a little bit passive aggressive or a lot passive aggressive, you understand subtext already and your analytical mind is already working, right? So the question here implies that there's an aspect of being an English major that is unhelpful or unproductive or unprofitable or impractical. Why? Because of that word possibly. If you take it out, right, think about the difference even in tone that happens with this question. What could you do with an English degree, right? Now, I could still intonate, right? I could be like, what could you do? Like I could act like an asshole, right? But if I remove that word possibly, it does become a more neutrally worded question. What could you do with an English degree, right? And again, notice how I could say it too in a very neutral way. I want information. But no matter how I say it, if I use that word possibly, it becomes hugely subtextual. What could you possibly do with an English degree? Even if I just try to say it as neutrally as possible, that word possibly, because of now this figurative meaning, this subtextual meaning, it becomes insinuation, right? Passive aggressive. Because you don't need it. If you want information, you take it out, right? What could you do with an English degree? I want to know what you could do. Give me the answer. But if I leave it in there, now there's something else, right? This word now changes the entire question. And this is what people get sometimes frustrated with because if you don't understand subtext, if you don't understand figurative ideas, that's where our frustrations come from. Now, usually in social contexts, you understand subtext, but not always. But it is important. And so think about the difference, right? If you were to add that word versus take it away. And this is kind of where we could get to, I think, a jumping point because most of you, probably, if not all of you, know how subtext works in conversations. Because again, we're in relationships, we're, talking to friends, colleagues, coaches, family members, and so forth, right? A lot of times, especially think about when you're talking to your parents versus talking to your friends, right? Not only does your language change, but your use of figurative language and so forth changes. So it's a way to kind of think about, you already know how to analyze in many different settings. So now you want to apply it to a whole work of art rather than just like a conversation. But speaking of conversations, I'll use I think it's from 2005, right? The War of the Worlds remake. Now, this is a good example of subtext because here we go. Even if you've never seen the movie, it's okay because you could actually derive things from this scene. It's a conversation between a father, Ray, and young daughter, Rachel. So Ray says, "Here we go, some nice peanut butter sandwiches." Rachel looks at him spreading his sandwiches, obviously masking frustration. She says, "I'm allergic to peanut butter." Ray is surprised, but he continues to spread the butter. Ray says, "Since when?" And there's a small pause, and she says, "Birth." Now, you understand that he's a terrible father. Now, why? Right? Well, put yourself obviously in this situation. If we were bad writers, we could easily give Rachel the line, "You're a bad father. I've been allergic to peanut butter since birth, blah, 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 blah," right? But all she says is birth, right? And it's a very powerful one word response. And why? Because we can determine the subtext by inferring that a good father would know what could kill his daughter, right? His daughter's allergies, especially the peanut butter allergy, right, is very lethal. So the fact that he doesn't know that, and since she's always been allergic to it, shows us many things. Now, even if you've never seen the movie, and actually it's better if you've never seen the movie, because now you could actually think critically and deductive without any kind of influence. Imagine if this were just a real setting. Let's pretend it wasn't a movie, and you've overheard this conversation. What are you immediately going to think? Well, you're going to think he's a terrible father because he almost killed his daughter. This is what's important, right, when we look at film and literature. What is meaningful about what is written and what is being said and conveyed and so forth. Now, sometimes the author will be direct, but most of the time, authors use subtext because it gives us that intellectual curiosity on part of us as the audience or readers. So this is where you know how to analyze, or at least you probably do, right? I would say you already know, but I don't want to assume, right? But for those of us who are very anxious about analytical kind of writing and analytical thoughts, you know how to piece together information from context clues and from subtextual clues. Typically, you do it in conversation. Typically, you do it in real world examples. So just try to adjust that in terms of fiction and, creative film and so forth. And again, we know that he's a bad father. His lack of knowledge concerning this fact weakens his position as a father and, of course, his authority figure. So if we go back to, 1015, 1060, ethos, right now his credibility, his authority is decreased. So go back to that Tolman model, that stoplight paragraph idea. Let's say I pretended to tell you, okay, so now you have to take this information and turn it into an argument. So here's how that would work, right? And here's how we could get analytical. So I'll analyze the scene, using the Tolman model, the stoplight paragraph idea, as a framework. So let's take a look at what I kind of wrote up to focus on this scene. Josh Friedman and David Coep, screenwriters, create Ray Ferrier, I forgot how that's pronounced, Tom Cruise, right, as a terrible father in order to show how a man can overcome his limitations during times of stress. So, clear topic sentence argument, I have to prove it now. In the scene when he takes his children to their old house, he tries to protect his children, even though he completely fails. In an attempt to feed his children, he makes peanut butter sandwiches only to have his daughter, Rachel, reveal that she is allergic to peanut butter since birth. Doubting her allergy, he asks since when, which is immediately met by Rachel with birth. This revelation is a complete surprise to him, demonstrating, notice the analytical idea, demonstrating that he has always been a terrible and absent father. Friedman and Coep use this moment not only to reinforce the friction between Ray and his children, but also to establish that Ray has never genuinely cared for his children. And again, notice the analysis. Rachel's one-word response shows that she detests how she is stuck with her father. Even in trying to do something good, he could have easily killed his own daughter with his good intentions, further demonstrating Ray's shortcomings as a father and protector. Through this subtle exchange, a lot of important character information is revealed since, although quick, it helps to establish one of the film's themes that a man can overcome his own weaknesses once he confronts his failures and shortcomings. All right. So That's pretty much how I could just take this very small scene and analyze the meaning of it, right? Derive, okay, what is one of the main themes? What's the main kind of meaning? What's meaningful about this scene? Not just to show that, Ray is a bad father, but of course, what's meaningful of that? Well, the whole point of the movie is that the character is trying to redeem himself. And even in that scene, he's trying to feed his children, but of course, he fails terribly. So here's what I'm trying to get at in terms of like what this means. Now, again, it's tough. Analysis is hard. Critical thinking is difficult, but it is attainable, right? As long with practice, and that's the kind of key issue. I think too, and important. That's why I introduced the Tolman model, stoplight paragraph idea. With formulas for writing, with using formulas, I think will also help. What are you trying to prove in each response? How do you prove it? And then what's meaningful about that, right? That's the kind of idea. Now, again, close reading is important because, of course, it's the building block of larger analysis, right? Anything can be better understood. Any kind of artifact can be better understood through close reading. Here's what's crucial. Your thoughts evolve not from someone else's ideas about reading. And this is why people go to Schmoop and Cliff Notes and Spark Notes and crap like that, because they're lazy, right? We want quick information, right? Here's what's meaningful. When you start dissecting literature and film, scene by scene, passage by passage, right? Your own intellectual curiosity peaks, right? Your own kind of ideas start evolving. The more closely you can observe, of course, the more original and exact your ideas will be. The best way to read is to think with the author, right? The best way to watch a film is to think with the director. This is a crucial kind of concept when you get into the difference between just passive viewing and active viewing, right? Now, some people, again, are generally lazy, right? Some people just want to consume information without any real thought process to it. But the real kind of exciting and intellectual mode is actively reading, actively watching a film. Now, some people will argue that, oh, no, it takes me out of the film or destroys it. Well, then that's too bad because, again, they're passively viewing something. The more you understand why something is constructed, same thing with a car, right? If you don't know anything about a car, you're kind of oblivious to when things go wrong, right? So you have to rely on other people. So it's the same thing when you analyze film literature. If you don't really know anything, right, then yeah, you could buy what other people are trying to, sell you. But the more knowledge you have and the more original your ideas are, well, then you can actually come up with something really important and very exciting, right? That's why people work on cars, because it's really exciting for them to look at how a car functions, right? So it's same thing with film, same thing with literature. The best way to read is to think with the author. The best way to watch a film is to think with the director. Now, approach the text as forms of entertainment, art, and craft at the same time. You could still enjoy something while looking at how it's created. And I think that's the kind of key issue too sometimes that people kind of get a little uncertain about. It's like, oh, I can't enjoy it if I look at it too long. Well, no, actually, the more you look at it, the more you actually should enjoy it if it is a good piece of art. If you're finding that when you start analyzing it, you're not liking it anymore, chances are bad piece of art. So those are kind of my key suggestions and key ideas today. Obviously, if you have questions, keep posting them to the Canvas forum. Email me. Analysis is tough, but you can do it. It just takes practice, like anything else. So keep emailing, keep responding. And obviously, if you need this in alternative formats, ask me or contact ARC. If not, just good luck with all the assignments and take care.